The hostilities between ABiH and the HVO came to an end with the so-called Washington Agreement of the 18th of March 1994. In the summer of 1995, the ABiH intensified military activities in the so-called Vosica pocket in central Bosnia, which was held by Serb forces. In September 1995, the ABiH launched two successful operations called Uragan and Faz, which resulted in VRS forces being driven out of the Vosica pocket. The EMD played an important role in the success of these operations. The General Framework Agreement for Peace in Bosnia and Herzegovina, also known as the Dayton Agreement, was signed on the 14th of December 1995 and finally brought to an end the conflict. The trial chamber will now turn to the crimes alleged in the indictment. The events of the 8th of June 1993 in Maline Bikoshi unfolded in the context of an offensive launched by the ABiH forces in the Bila Valley against the HVO. The evidence shows that on and around that day, different groups of Mujahedin, including the one from the Polyanica camp near Mihorici and the Abu Hamza's group based in Guchakora, or the Turkish guerrilla from Zenica, were also engaged in the fighting at various locations in the Bila Valley. After taking control of the village of Maline in the morning of the 8th of June 1993, ABiH soldiers escorted captured Bosnian Croat civilians and HVO soldiers from Maline towards Mehurici in separate groups. Before reaching Mehurici, on their way through Polyanice, these groups were intercepted by armed foreign and Bosnian Mujahedin. The Mujahedin forcibly seized approximately 30 individuals from these groups, including some wounded soldiers, and ordered them to walk back in the direction of Bikoshi. On the way to Bikoshi, a lady named Anna Pranes, who had been joined to the group of captives at one point, was harassed by two foreign Mujahedin and was eventually killed by a volley of gunfire. Anna Pranes wore a Red Cross armband. When the group reached Bikoshi, another captive was shot dead when he attempted to flee. Shortly thereafter, one of the captives started screaming in an epileptic fit. The Mujahedin reacted by opening fire at the entire group. Eventually, 24 individuals were killed, and at a minimum, 5 individuals were seriously injured by gunfire. The trial chamber found that the prosecution had established beyond reasonable doubt the elements of murder and cruel treatment as violations of the laws or customs of war under count 1 and 2. With respect to the identification of the Mujahedin perpetrators, the evidence is not clear as to which particular unit or group they belonged. The trial chamber took into account several factors to determine the identity of the perpetrators, and for reasons detailed in the written judgment, reached the conclusion that it was not established beyond reasonable doubt that the perpetrators were Mujahedin from the Polyanica camp. The trial chamber will now turn to the events in Livade and Kamenica Camp in July and August 1995. On the 21st of July 1995, following a military operation in the Vucic pocket called Operation Prolietze II, Mujahedin captured 12 VRS members, including a doctor and a paramedic, and detained them in a 2-story house in Livade for the next 2 days. For the reasons set out in the written judgment, the trial chamber was satisfied that the 12 detainees had been held in the custody of the EMD. On 2 occasions, on the 21st of July 1995, one of the Mujahideen brought to the detainees' room a severed head from which fresh blood was gushed. These 2 severed heads belonged to Momir Mitrovic and Predrag Knežević. While the detainees did not witness the killing of Momir Mitrovic and Predrag Knežević, the trial chamber was satisfied, for the reasons set out in the judgment, that these men had been intentionally killed by the EMD members. The trial chamber found that the prosecution had established beyond reasonable doubt the elements of murder as a violation of the laws or customs of war under count 1. Between the 21st and the 23rd of July 1995, members of the EMD restrained the 12 VRS detainees in uncomfortable positions and subjected them to various kinds of maltreatment, including beatings and the display of the freshly severed heads of Momir Mitrovic and Predrag Knežević. The trial chamber found that this treatment had caused the detainees serious mental and physical suffering, as well as injury, and also amounts to serious attacks on human dignity. The trial chamber therefore found that the prosecution had established beyond reasonable doubt the elements of cruel treatment as a violation of the laws or customs of war under count 2. On the 23rd of July, the Mujahideen transferred the 12 VRS detainees from Livade to the Kamenica Camp, where they were detained in a derelict house. On the night of that day, a Mujahideen fired a shot in cold blood at one of the detainees, Gojko Vujicic. The head of Gojko Vujicic was subsequently severed and placed on his stomach. Later on, the detainees were forced to kiss the severed head. While at the Kamenica Camp, the VRS detainees were subjected to various other forms of maltreatment and humiliation, including severe beatings and the infliction of electric shocks. On the 24th of August 1995, they were transferred to the Zenica KP Dom facility. The trial chamber was satisfied that in relation to the killing of Gojko Vujicic, the prosecution had established beyond reasonable doubt the elements of murder as a violation of the laws or customs of war under count 1. And in relation to the 12 VRS detainees, the trial chamber was satisfied that the prosecution had established elements of cruel treatment as a violation of the laws or customs of war under count 2. The trial chamber will now turn to the events in Kirsten and the Kamenica Camp in September 1995. In the afternoon of the 11th of September 1995, a day after Operation Uragan and FARS were launched, soldiers from the 5th Battalion of the ABiH 328th Brigade and Mujahideen captured approximately 60 Bosnian Serb soldiers and civilians, including 3 women called DRW-1, DRW-2, and DRW-3 in the vicinity of the village of Kirsten. The captives were ordered to walk in a column towards Kirsten. On the way, 2 captives, Milenko Stanic and Zvingo Todorovic, were shot. The trial chamber found that an EMD member had killed Milenko Stanic and that the prosecution had established beyond reasonable doubt the elements of murder as a violation of laws or customs of war under count 1. However, the trial chamber found that the prosecution had not proved beyond reasonable doubt that Zvingo Todorovic had been killed by a soldier of the EMD, as alleged in the indictment. The Mujahedin and the ABiH soldiers then took 52 VRS soldiers to a hall in Keston, and at the hall, ABiH soldiers of the 5th Battalion of the 328th Brigade guarded the detainees. At a certain point, approximately 20 armed Mujahedin barged into the hall and seized the detainees from the ABiH soldiers at gunpoint. The detainees were transported on 2 trucks to the Kamenica Camp. At the Kamenica Camp, some or all of the 52 detainees were incarcerated on 2 floors of a derelict house. Circumstantial evidence, including exhumation evidence, indicates that those 52 detainees were eventually killed. In light of the evidence as a whole, and for the reasons detailed in the written judgment, the trial chamber was satisfied that the 52 men listed in Annex C to the indictment had been intentionally killed by members of the EMD at the Kamenica Camp between the 11th of September 1995 and the 14th of December 1995. The trial chamber therefore held that the prosecution had established beyond reasonable doubt the elements of murder as a violation of the laws or customs of war under count 1. However, in light of the insufficient evidence regarding the cruel treatment of the detainees, the trial chamber found that in relation to the 52 detainees, the prosecution had not proved beyond reasonable doubt the elements of cruel treatment as a violation of the laws or customs of war under count 2.